I stood in the grand ballroom of the Waldorf Astoria, the kind of place where dreams were supposed to come true, but mine felt like it was slipping through my fingers. The chandeliers above cast a dazzling glow, their light bouncing off the polished marble floors and the gilded walls, but all I could feel was a bone-deep chill. My wedding dress, a pristine white gown with intricate lace, clung to my body like a second skin, its weight a constant reminder of the role I was forced to play. I, Charlotte Evans, a 29-year-old florist who once dreamed of a simple life filled with love and laughter, was about to marry Nathan Caldwell, a cold, billionaire CEO I'd never met until today. My fingers trembled as I adjusted the delicate veil, the soft fabric brushing against my cheek like a whisper of the past. I thought of my mother, the woman who had taught me how to arrange flowers with care, her hands guiding mine as we placed roses in a vase, her laughter filling our tiny apartment. She'd left when I was 8, disappearing without a word, leaving me with a father who buried his grief in work and a void I could never fill. I'd always imagined my wedding day would be different, filled with warmth, with a man who looked at me like I was his entire world. But now, as I stood here, I was nothing more than a transaction, a pawn in a deal to save my father's crumbling company. The soft hum of the organ began, pulling me from my thoughts, and the double doors at the end of the room swung open. My breath caught as Nathan Caldwell stepped inside, his presence commanding the space like a storm rolling in. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and impossibly handsome in his black tuxedo, but there was no warmth in him. His dark hair was slicked back, his jaw set in a hard line, and his eyes, those piercing gray eyes, held no trace of emotion as they met mine. He walked toward me with the precision of a man who controlled everything in his life, each step echoing on the marble floor like a drumbeat of inevitability. I forced myself to meet his gaze, my heart pounding in my chest, but all I saw was a wall of ice. He stopped in front of me, close enough that I could smell the faint scent of his cologne. Something sharp and expensive, like the man himself. The officiant began to speak, his voice a distant hum as Nathan took my hand. His touch was firm, almost mechanical, his fingers cold against my skin. I wanted to pull away, to run from this gilded cage, but I couldn't. My father's desperate plea echoed in my mind. This is the only way, Charlotte. Please, for the family. Do you, Charlotte Evans, take Nathan Caldwell to be your lawfully wedded husband? The officiant asked, his words slicing through the haze in my mind. I swallowed hard, my throat tight with unshed tears. I do, I whispered, the words tasting like ash on my tongue. My voice was barely audible, but it was enough. I had no choice. Nathan's turn came next, and his response was just as hollow. I do, he said, his voice deep and steady, but devoid of feeling. He slid the ring onto my finger, a flawless diamond that sparkled under the chandelier light, but felt like a shackle around my heart. As I mirrored the gesture, slipping the band onto his finger, I noticed something. A flicker in his eyes, so brief I might have imagined it. It wasn't joy or love, but something else. Regret? Pain? I couldn't tell, but it was the first crack I'd seen in his icy facade, and it made me wonder, why had he agreed to this? The officiant pronounced us husband and wife, and the small gathering of guests, mostly Nathan's business associates and a few distant relatives of mine, clapped politely. There was no warmth in their applause, no joy in their smiles. They were here for appearances, just like I was. Nathan didn't kiss me, not even a perfunctory peck for the crowd. Instead, he offered his arm, and I took it, my fingers trembling, as they rested on the smooth fabric of his sleeve. We walked down the aisle together, a picture-perfect couple on the outside, but inside, I felt like I was drowning. As we stepped out of the ballroom, the cool air of the hallway hit me, and I let out a shaky breath. Nathan didn't look at me. his gaze fixed straight ahead as we made our way to the waiting car. I glanced at him, searching for that flicker of emotion I'd seen earlier. But his face was a mask again, unreadable and distant. My chest tightened, with a mix of fear and resentment. Who was this man I'd just bound myself to? And why did I feel like I'd just made the biggest mistake of my life? The car door opened and I slid inside, the leather seats cold against my skin. Nathan followed, sitting beside me but keeping a careful distance. The driver started the engine, and as the car pulled away from the hotel, I stared out the window, watching the city lights blur into streaks of gold and white. I thought of my little flower shop, the one place where I'd always felt safe, where I could lose myself in the scent of roses and the softness of petals. That life felt so far away, now like a dream I'd never get back. I turned to Nathan, my voice barely above a whisper. "Why did you agree to this?" I asked, the question slipping out before I could stop it. He didn't answer right away, his jaw tightening as he stared out his own window. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, almost a growl. "Because I had to," he said. And there was something in his tone, something raw and unguarded, that made my heart skip a beat. I wanted to press him, to demand more, but the weight of the day crashed over me, and I turned away, my hands clenching in my lap. This was my new reality. A loveless marriage to a man I didn't know, a man who seemed as trapped as I was. But that flicker in his eyes, that brief moment of vulnerability, stayed with me, a tiny spark in the darkness. Maybe, just maybe there, was more to Nathan Caldwell than I thought. The city lights stretched out below me like a sea of stars, their golden glow reflecting off the floor-to-ceiling windows of Nathan's penthouse. I stood in the bedroom, my new prison, the vast space feeling more like a museum than a home. The walls were a stark white, the furniture sleek and modern, and the bed, a sprawling king-sized monstrosity with crisp white linens, loomed in the center of the room like a silent threat. I wrapped my arms around myself, the thin silk of my nightgown doing little to ward off the chill that had settled into my bones. I, Charlotte Evans, was now Charlotte Caldwell, a name that felt foreign on my tongue, a title that came with a price I wasn't sure I could pay. The drive from the Waldorf Astoria had been silent, the air between Nathan and me thick with unspoken tension. He hadn't said a word since his cryptic answer in the car. Because I had to, and I hadn't dared to push him further. Now, as I stood here, waiting for him to join me, my mind raced with 1,000 fears. What did he expect from me tonight? What kind of man was he behind that icy facade? I thought of my flower shop, the little haven where I'd spent my days arranging bouquets, the scent of lilies and roses a comforting constant. That life felt like a distant memory now, replaced by this sterile, glittering world I didn't belong in. The door opened with a soft click, and I turned, my heart leaping into my throat. Nathan stepped inside, his presence filling the room like a storm cloud. He'd shed his tuxedo jacket, his white dress shirt unbuttoned at the collar, revealing a glimpse of the strong column of his throat. His dark hair was slightly tousled, as if he'd run his hands through it, but his gray eyes were as unreadable as ever. He didn't speak, didn't even look at me at first, his gaze sweeping the room as if he were inspecting it for flaws. Then, slowly, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box, placing it on the nightstand beside the bed. I stared at the box, my pulse quickening. "What is that?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper, the words trembling with a mix of fear and curiosity. Nathan finally met my gaze, his expression still guarded. But there was something softer in his eyes now, something I couldn't quite place. "Open it," he said, his voice low and steady, but not unkind. I hesitated, my fingers hovering over the box for a moment before I lifted the lid. Inside, nestled against a bed of black satin, was a delicate silver necklace, its pendant a tiny, intricately carved flower, a daisy, my favorite. My breath caught in my throat, and I touched the pendant with trembling fingers, the cool metal a stark contrast to the warmth of my skin. Memories flooded back, my mother kneeling beside me in our tiny garden, her hands guiding mine as we planted daisies, her laughter bright and carefree. "They're like you, Charlotte," she'd said, her voice soft. Simple, but strong. I looked up at Nathan, my eyes wide with confusion. Why this?" I asked, my voice cracking with emotion. He shifted, his jaw tightening for a moment before he spoke. "I don't want you to feel like a prisoner here," he said, his tone measured but carrying a weight I hadn't expected. "My mother used to wear this necklace. She loved daisies too. I thought it might suit you." His words hit me like a wave, and for the first time, I saw a crack in his armor, a glimpse of the man beneath the cold exterior. I clutched the necklace in my hand, the pendant pressing into my palm, and I felt a tear slip down my cheek. I didn't know what to say, didn't know how to process this unexpected kindness from a man I'd assumed would be cruel. "Thank you," I whispered, the words feeling inadequate, but it was all I could manage. Nathan nodded, his gaze dropping to the floor for a moment before he looked back at me. "I won't touch you, Charlotte," he said, his voice firm but not harsh. "Not until you're ready. I know this isn't what you wanted, and I don't want to make it worse." I stared at him, my heart pounding in my chest. His words were a lifeline, a promise I hadn't expected, and they stirred something inside me, a flicker of hope, fragile but real. I wanted to ask him more, to understand why he was doing this, why he cared enough to give me this piece of his past. But the weight of the day pressed down on me, and I couldn't find the words. He turned to leave, his hand on the doorknob, but I called out to him. My voice soft but steady. "Nathan," I said, and he paused, glancing back at me over his shoulder. "Why daisies? For your mother, I mean." For a moment I thought he wouldn't answer, but then he spoke, his voice quieter now, almost tender. "She said they reminded her of the life she wanted, a simple one, free from the expectations of this world." He hesitated, then added, "I think she would have liked you." With that, he walked out, closing the door behind him with a soft click. I stood there, the necklace still in my hand, my mind reeling. I sat on the edge of the bed, my fingers tracing the delicate lines of the daisy pendant, and I thought of my own mother, of the daisies we'd planted together, of the life I'd lost when she left. For the first time since I'd stepped into this world of wealth and power, I felt a connection. Not to Nathan, not yet, but to the memory of a woman I'd never met. A woman who, like me, had longed for something more. I slipped the necklace around my neck, the pendant resting against my chest, a small piece of comfort in this cold, unfamiliar place. As I lay down, the city lights casting a soft glow through the windows, I couldn't shake the feeling that maybe, just maybe, there was more to Nathan Caldwell than I'd thought. And maybe, in this loveless marriage, there was a chance for something real. The morning light filtered through the penthouse windows, casting a soft golden glow over the sleek, modern space. I stood on the balcony, a small oasis of greenery amidst the sterile luxury of Nathan's world, tending to a row of potted flowers I'd insisted on bringing from my shop. The daisies were my favorite, their delicate white petals a stark contrast to the cold glass and steel that surrounded me. I ran my fingers over their soft edges, the familiar motion grounding me, and I thought of my mother. She'd always said every flower had a soul, a story to tell if you listened closely enough. "Daisies are like you, Charlotte," she'd told me once, her voice warm with love. They bloom even in the hardest places. I hadn't seen her in over 20 years, not since she left without a word, but her memory was a constant ache in my chest, especially now in this loveless marriage I'd been forced into. I glanced down at the necklace Nathan had given me the night before, the daisy pendant resting against my skin, a bittersweet reminder of both my mother and the man I'd married. His gesture had caught me off guard, a crack in his icy facade that I couldn't stop thinking about. But despite his words, "I won't touch you, Charlotte," the distance between us felt as vast as the city skyline stretching out before me. Nathan had been a ghost in his own home since our wedding. Night, leaving early for his office and returning late, if at all. I'd spent the past few days alone, wandering the penthouse like a stranger, trying to make sense of my new reality. The silence was suffocating, broken only by the hum of the city below and the occasional call from Eleanor, my older sister, who checked in to make sure I was okay. "You don't have to do this, Charlotte," she'd said, her voice tight with worry. But I did. I had to, for my father, for the family name, even if it meant sacrificing my own happiness. That evening, I was in the kitchen, arranging a small bouquet of daisies in a vase, when I heard Nathan's voice drifting through the penthouse. He was on the phone, his tone sharp and clipped, a stark contrast to the quiet vulnerability he'd shown the night before. I froze, my hands stilling on the flowers, and listened. "I don't care what it takes," he said, his voice low but firm. "I made a promise to my father and I'll keep it. This marriage, it's the only way." My heart sank, a cold weight settling in my chest. So that was it. A promise to his father. Nothing more, nothing less. I was just a means to an end. A piece in some high-stakes game I didn't understand. The realization stung, but it also fueled a spark of anger inside me. I wasn't a pawn. Not anymore. I deserved answers. I marched into the living room, the vase of daisies still in my hands, and found Nathan standing by the windows, his phone pressed to his ear. He turned at the sound of my footsteps, his gray eyes narrowing slightly as he ended the call with a curt, "I'll handle it." He slipped the phone into his pocket, his expression unreadable. But I could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his jaw clenched as he looked at me. "Why didn't you refuse?" I demanded, my voice trembling with a mix of anger and desperation. "You have everything. Money, power, influence. Why agree to this marriage if you didn't want it?" Nathan didn't answer right away, his gaze dropping to the floor for a moment before he met my eyes again. There was a flicker of something in his expression, pain, maybe, or regret, but it was gone as quickly as it came. "You don't understand, Charlotte," he said, his voice low and rough, the words carrying a weight I couldn't quite grasp. "Then make me understand," I snapped, setting the vase down on the coffee table with more force than I intended. The daisies trembled in their vase, a silent witness to the storm brewing between us. "I heard you on the phone. A promise to your father. That's all I am to you, isn't it? A way to keep your word?" Nathan's jaw tightened, and for a moment, I thought he might walk away, retreat behind that wall of ice he'd built around himself. But then he did, something I didn't expect. He stepped closer, his hand reaching out to grasp mine, his touch firm, but not harsh. "Come with me," he said, his voice quieter now, almost a plea. Before I could protest, he led me out onto the balcony, the cool night air brushing against my skin. The city lights sparkled below us, a glittering tapestry of gold and white, and for a moment, I forgot my anger, lost in the beauty of the view. Nathan released my hand, his gaze fixed on the horizon, and when he spoke, his voice was softer, tinged with a vulnerability I hadn't heard before. "My mother was forced into a marriage she didn't want," he said, his words slow and deliberate, as if each one cost him something. "She spent her life trapped, miserable, because of my father's expectations. I swore I'd never let that happen to anyone else. But when my father died, he made me promise to protect the family name, no matter the cost. This marriage, it was the only way to keep that promise. I stared at him, my anger fading as his words sank in. I thought of my own mother, of the pain she must have felt when she left, of the choices she'd been forced to make. For the first time, I saw Nathan not as a cold, unfeeling billionaire, but as a man carrying the weight of his own past, just as I was. I didn't know, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Nathan turned to me, his gray eyes searching mine, and for a moment I thought he might say more. But then he stepped back, the distance between us returning as quickly as it had vanished. "You don't have to understand me, Charlotte," he said, his voice steady again, but there was a tremor in it, a crack in his armor that I couldn't ignore. "Just don't hate me for this." I didn't know what to say, my emotions a tangled mess of empathy and uncertainty. As Nathan walked back inside, leaving me alone on the balcony, I touched the daisy pendant at my throat, my mother's words echoing in my mind. Maybe, just maybe, Nathan and I weren't so different after all. And maybe, in this cold, glittering world, there was a chance for us to find something real. The ballroom of the Plaza Hotel glittered like a jewel, its crystal chandeliers casting a warm, golden light over the sea of elegantly dressed guests. I stood at the edge of the room, my fingers clutching the stem of a champagne flute, the delicate glass cool against my skin. The navy blue gown I wore, a choice Nathan had made, delivered to the penthouse that morning with a note that simply read, "Wear this tonight," hugged my curves, its silk fabric shimmering under the lights. I felt like a doll on display, dressed up for a world I didn't belong in. I, Charlotte Evans, a florist who'd once found joy in the simplicity of arranging bouquets, was now Charlotte Caldwell, the wife of a billionaire, and the weight of that title was suffocating. Nathan stood a few feet away, his broad shoulders filling out his tailored tuxedo, his dark hair catching the light as he spoke with a group of men in suits. He hadn't said much to me since that night on the balcony, when he'd shared the painful truth about his mother's forced marriage. His words had lingered in my mind, a quiet echo of understanding that had softened my view of him. But the distance between us remained. He was still a stranger, a man who'd married me out of duty, not love, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was nothing more than a prop in his carefully curated life. The past week had been a whirlwind of headlines, each one more invasive than the last. "Florist weds billionaire. A Cinderella story or a business deal?" screamed one tabloid. "Nathan Caldwell's mystery bride. Who is Charlotte Evans?" asked another. The press had descended on us like vultures, their cameras flashing outside the penthouse, their questions shouted through car windows. I'd tried to ignore it, to focus on the small comforts of my new life, the daisies on the balcony, the necklace Nathan had given me, but the scrutiny was relentless, and tonight, at this charity gala, I felt it more than ever. I took a sip of champagne, the bubbles sharp on my tongue, and scanned the room. The guests were a mix of high society elites, women in glittering gowns, men in bespoke suits, all of them watching me with a mix of curiosity and disdain. I overheard a whisper from a group nearby, their voices low but cutting. "She's just a gold digger," one woman said, her lips curling in a sneer. Nathan could have had anyone. Why her? My cheeks burned, and I turned away, pretending not to hear. But the words stung, embedding themselves in my already fragile confidence. I glanced at Nathan, hoping for some sign of support, but he was deep in conversation, his expression as unreadable as ever. I felt a pang of loneliness, sharper than I'd expected, and I wondered if this was what my life would be now, standing on the sidelines, a silent accessory to a man who barely acknowledged me. But then, as if sensing my gaze. Nathan turned, his gray eyes meeting mine across the room. For a moment, I thought I saw a flicker of concern in his expression, but before I could be sure, a man approached me, his presence pulling me from my thoughts. "Mrs. Caldwell," he said, his voice smooth but laced with malice. I recognized him immediately. Richard Hayes, a business rival of Nathan's, a man I'd seen in the tabloids, always with a smirk that promised trouble. He was tall, with sharp features and cold blue eyes, his tuxedo impeccable, but his demeanor anything but. "You look out of place," he added, his tone dripping with condescension. I straightened, my grip on the champagne flute tightening. "I'm fine, thank you," I said, my voice steady despite the unease curling in my stomach. Richard smirked, taking a step closer, his voice lowering to a dangerous whisper. "You know, I could ruin Nathan with a single phone call," he said, his words a venomous promise. "I know things about him, things he wouldn't want the world to know, and if he doesn't play nice, I'll make sure everyone knows what a sham this marriage is." My heart pounded, a mix of fear and anger surging through me. I didn't know what secrets Richard was hinting at, but I knew I couldn't let him see my fear. "I don't know what you're talking about," I said, my voice firm, but inside I was trembling. I turned to walk away, but Richard's next. Words stopped me cold. "Ask Nathan about his father's debts," he called after me, his voice loud enough for nearby guests to turn and stare. "Ask him why he really married you." The room seemed to close in around me, the whispers of the guests growing louder, their eyes boring into me like daggers. I felt exposed, raw, as if every insecurity I'd ever had was on display for the world to see. I turned to Nathan, my voice rising despite myself. "I don't need you to protect me," I snapped, the words spilling out before I could stop them. I didn't care that we were in public, didn't care that my outburst was drawing more attention. I was tired of being a pawn, tired of the lies and the secrets. Nathan's eyes darkened, but he didn't flinch. He stepped closer, his voice low and steady, cutting through the noise of the room. "But I need you, Charlotte," he said, his words so raw, so unexpected, that they stole the breath from my lungs. I stared at him, my anger faltering as his words sank in. There was something in his voice, a quiet desperation I hadn't heard before. And for the first time, I saw him not as a cold, untouchable billionaire, but as a man who was just as trapped as I was. The room around us faded, the whispers and stares melting away, and for a moment, it was just the two of us, standing on the edge of something I couldn't name. But the moment was shattered by the flash of cameras, the press swarming as I turned to leave the ballroom. I pushed through the crowd, my heels clicking on the marble floor, the lights blinding me as I stepped into the night. I didn't know what Richard meant about Nathan's father, didn't know what secrets Nathan was hiding. But I knew one thing. I wasn't going to let this world break me. I touched the daisy pendant at my throat, a small anchor in the storm, and I made a silent promise to myself. I would find the truth, no matter the cost. The penthouse felt emptier than ever, the silence pressing against me like a physical weight. I sat on the edge of the couch in the living room, my hands clasped tightly in my lap. The daisy pendant at my throat, a small comfort amidst the storm raging inside me. The events of the charity gala still haunted me. Richard Hayes' venomous words, the blinding flash of cameras, Nathan's raw admission. "But I need you, Charlotte." His voice echoed in my mind, a lifeline I couldn't quite grasp, but it was overshadowed by the questions Richard had planted. What did he mean about Nathan's father? What secrets was Nathan hiding? I hadn't seen Nathan since that night. He'd left early the next morning, his absence a silent confirmation of the distance between us. I'd spent the day trying to distract myself, arranging a new bouquet of daisies for the balcony, their soft petals a reminder of simpler times. But the weight of the unknown was too much, and I knew I couldn't keep running from the truth. I needed answers, not just about Nathan, but about my own past, the pieces of my life that had never made sense. The doorbell rang, a sharp sound that jolted me from my thoughts. I stood, smoothing the wrinkles from my simple cotton dress, and opened the door to find Eleanor, my older sister, standing there. Her dark hair was pulled back in a messy bun, her face etched with worry, but her presence was a balm to my frayed nerves. Beside her stood her son Jack, his 12-year-old frame gangly and awkward, a shy smile on his face as he clutched a small bouquet of wildflowers. "Aunt Charlotte," Jack said, thrusting the flowers toward me. "I picked these for you." I took the bouquet, my heart softening at the gesture, and pulled him into a hug. "Thank you, Jack," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "They're beautiful." Eleanor watched us, her eyes softening for a moment before her expression turned serious. "We need to talk," she said, her voice low, and I knew this wasn't just a casual visit. I nodded, leading them inside, and sent Jack to the balcony to water the daisies, while Eleanor and I sat on the couch. She took a deep breath, her hands twisting in her lap, and I braced myself for whatever she was about to say. "Charlotte," she began, her voice trembling. "There's something I've been keeping from you. About Mom." My heart stopped, the air in the room growing heavy. "What about her?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. I'd spent years believing my mother had abandoned us, that she'd left because she didn't love us enough to stay. The pain of that betrayal had shaped me, made me guarded, and I wasn't sure I could handle more. Eleanor's eyes filled with tears, and she reached for my hand, her grip tight. "She didn't leave us, Charlotte," she said, her voice breaking. "Dad forced her to go. He made her leave to protect the family name. She was going to expose his gambling debts, the ones that nearly ruined the company years ago, and he couldn't let that happen. He told her if she stayed, he'd make sure we were taken away from her. So she left, to protect us." The words hit me like a tidal wave, shattering everything I thought I knew. My mother hadn't abandoned me. She'd been forced out, torn from us by the same man who'd sold me into this marriage to save his company. I felt a sob rise in my throat, my vision blurring with tears. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked, my voice raw with pain. "All these years I thought she didn't love us." "I wanted to," Eleanor said, her voice thick with guilt. "But Dad made me promise not to. He said it was for your own good, that you'd be better off not knowing. But when I saw what he did to you, forcing you into this marriage, I couldn't keep it from you anymore. You deserve the truth." I pulled my hand from hers, standing abruptly, my emotions a tangled mess of anger, grief, and betrayal. I thought of my father, of the man I'd sacrificed my happiness for, and I felt a rage I'd never known before. But beneath that rage was something else, a desperate need to find my mother, to hear her side of the story, to heal the wound that had festered for so long. I turned to the door, my mind made up, but Eleanor grabbed my arm, her eyes wide with concern. "Where are you going?" she asked, her voice trembling. "I need to see Nathan," I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. "I need to know the truth about this marriage, about everything." I found Nathan in his office downtown, a sleek space with floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the city. He was behind his desk, his dark hair catching the light, his gray eyes focused on a stack of papers. But when he saw me, he stood, his expression shifting from surprise to concern. "Charlotte," he said, his voice low. "What's wrong?" I didn't waste time with pleasantries. "Why didn't you tell me the truth about this marriage?" I demanded, my voice shaking with emotion. "I know about my father, about what he did to my mother. Is that why you agreed to this?" To protect your family name, just like he did? Nathan's jaw tightened, and for a moment, I thought he might shut me out again. But then he stepped around the desk, his eyes searching mine, and when he spoke, his voice was raw with emotion. "I didn't want you to live in pain like my mother did," he said, his words echoing the story he'd told me on the balcony. "She was trapped in a marriage she didn't want, forced to stay for the sake of appearances. When your father came to me with this deal, I saw a chance to save you from that kind of life. I thought I could protect you." His words hit me hard, a mix of gratitude and frustration swirling inside me. I wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that his intentions were pure, but the weight of my own family's secrets was too much. "I need to find her," I said, my voice breaking. "I need to find my mother." Nathan stepped closer, his hand reaching out to touch my arm, but I pulled away, my resolve hardening. "Don't try to stop me," I said, my voice firm. "I need to do this." He nodded, his expression a mix of understanding and regret. "I won't stop you," he said, his voice soft. "But I'll be here when you come back." I turned and walked out, my heart pounding with a newfound determination. I didn't know what I'd find when I tracked down my mother, but I knew one thing. I was done being a pawn in other people's games. It was time to take control of my own story. The small house in upstate New York was a far cry from the glittering world I'd been thrust into. Its weathered wooden exterior and overgrown garden spoke of years of neglect, but there was a quiet beauty to it, a simplicity that reminded me of the life I'd once known. I stood on the porch, my heart pounding in my chest, the daisy pendant at my throat a small anchor as I raised my hand to knock. I, Charlotte Evans, had come here to find my mother, to uncover the truth Eleanor had revealed, that she hadn't abandoned us, but had been forced to leave by my father. The weight of that revelation still pressed against me, a mix of hope and fear swirling inside me as I waited for the door to open. When it did, I saw her. My mother, older now. Her dark, hair streaked with gray, her face lined with the years I'd missed. But her eyes, those warm brown eyes I remembered so well, were the same, and they widened with shock as she saw me. "Charlotte," she whispered, her voice trembling, and before I could speak, she pulled me into a hug, her arms wrapping around me with a fierceness that broke something inside me. I clung to her, tears streaming down my face, the years of pain and longing pouring out in that single embrace. We sat in her small living room, a cup of tea warming my hands as she told me, "Everything. I never wanted to leave you," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Your father. He said if I stayed, he'd make sure you and Eleanor were taken away from me. He was drowning in gambling debts, and he couldn't risk the scandal. I had no choice, Charlotte. I thought if I left, you'd be safe." Her words confirmed what Eleanor had told me, but hearing them from my mother made the pain raw all over again. I thought of my father, of the man I'd sacrificed my happiness for, and I felt a rage I couldn't contain. But beneath that rage was a deep, aching relief. I hadn't been abandoned. My mother had loved me, had fought for me in the only way she could. We talked for hours, piecing together the years we'd lost. And when I left, I promised to come back, to rebuild the bond that had been stolen from us. But the peace I'd found with my mother was short-lived. When I returned to the city, the headlines were everywhere, plastered across every tabloid and newsstand. Nathan Caldwell's secret child, billionaire's hidden scandal exposed. My heart sank as I read the article, the words blurring through my tears. Richard Hayes had made good on his threat, revealing that Nathan had a daughter, a 5-year-old girl named Emily, from a past relationship, a child he'd kept hidden to protect his family's reputation. I drove straight to the penthouse, my hands trembling on the steering wheel as the city lights streaked past in a blur of gold and white. The car was a sleek black sedan Nathan had insisted I use, its leather seats cold against my skin. But all I could think about was the man waiting for me at home. I needed to know the truth. Not just about Emily, but about us. About this marriage that had started as a transaction, but was slowly becoming something more. Nathan was in the living room when I arrived, standing by the windows, his broad shoulders tense as he stared out at the city. He turned at the sound of my footsteps, his gray eyes dark with a storm of emotions I couldn't quite read. "Charlotte," he said, his voice low, but there was a tremor in it, a vulnerability I'd never heard before. "Why didn't you tell me about her?" I asked, my voice shaking with a mix of anger and hurt. I held up the tabloid, the headline screaming in bold letters, and I saw the pain flash across his face. "Your daughter, Nathan. Why didn't you tell me you had a child?" He didn't answer right away, his jaw clenching as he turned back to the window, his hands gripping the edge of the sill. When he finally spoke, his voice was raw, each word heavy with regret. "I didn't want her to be part of this world," he said, his voice breaking. "Emily, she's with her mother, in a quiet life, away from all this. I thought if I kept her a secret, she'd be safe from the scrutiny, from the expectations that destroyed my mother. But I was wrong. Richard found out, and now she's in danger because of me." I stared at him, my anger fading as I saw the tears glistening in his eyes, the first I'd ever seen from him. Nathan Caldwell, the cold, unfeeling billionaire, was breaking before me, and it shattered something inside me. I stepped closer, my voice softer now, but still firm. "You should have told me," I said, my words a quiet plea. "I could have helped you. We could have faced this together." Nathan turned to me, his eyes searching mine, and for a moment, I thought he might pull away, retreat behind that wall of ice he'd built around himself. But then he stepped closer, his hand reaching out to cup my cheek, his touch gentle but trembling. "I didn't want to drag you into my mess," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "But I need you now, Charlotte, more than I've ever needed anyone." His words hit me like a wave, and I felt a tear slip down my cheek, his thumb brushing it away with a tenderness that stole my breath. I thought of my mother, of the sacrifices she'd made for me, and I knew I couldn't walk away from Nathan. Not now, not when he was finally letting me in. "Then let's face it together," I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. "We'll protect Emily. We'll protect each other." Nathan nodded, his hand dropping to mine, his grip tight, as if I were his lifeline. The next day, we stood together at a press conference, the cameras flashing like a storm as Nathan spoke, his voice steady but raw. "Emily is my daughter," he said, his words echoing through the room. "And I'll do whatever it takes to keep her safe, even if it means losing everything." I stood beside him, my hand in his, and for the first time, I felt like we were a team. Two broken souls fighting for something greater than ourselves. The road ahead would be hard, but I knew we'd face it together. The familiar scent of roses and lilies enveloped me as I stepped into my old flower shop, a small haven tucked away on a quiet street in the city. The bell above the door jingled softly, a sound that had once been the soundtrack of my days. And I felt a pang of nostalgia so sharp it brought tears to my eyes. I, Charlotte Evans, had come here to find solace after the whirlwind of the past. Few days, the press conference where Nathan had publicly acknowledged his daughter, Emily, the relentless media scrutiny that followed, and the looming threat of Richard Hayes, who seemed determined to destroy us. But today, I wasn't alone. Jack, my nephew, was with me, his 12-year-old hands carefully arranging a bouquet of daisies under my guidance. Like this, Aunt Charlotte? Aunt O. Jack asked, his brow furrowed in concentration as he placed a daisy in the vase, its white petals bright against the greenery. I smiled, my heart warming at his earnestness. Exactly like that, I said, ruffling his hair. You're a natural, Jack. Teaching him felt like a small act of normalcy in a life that had become anything but, a reminder of the simple joys I'd once taken for granted. But even here, in this sanctuary of flowers, I couldn't escape the weight of what was coming. Richard had escalated his attacks, leaking more damaging information about Nathan's past, and I knew we couldn't keep running from the storm. The bell jingled again, and I looked up to see Nathan standing in the doorway, his broad frame filling the space. He was dressed more casually than I'd ever seen him, in a dark sweater and jeans, but the tension in his shoulders was unmistakable. His gray eyes met mine, and I saw a mix of determination and vulnerability that made my heart ache. "Charlotte," he said, his voice low, "we need to talk." I nodded, sending Jack to the back to fetch more flowers, and turned to Nathan, my hands stilling on the bouquet I'd been arranging. "What's happened?" I asked, my voice steady despite the unease curling in my stomach. Nathan stepped closer, his expression grim. "Richard is going after Emily," he said, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. "He's threatened to drag her mother into this, to expose her to the media. I can't let that happen, Charlotte. I won't let him destroy her life." I felt a surge of protectiveness, not just for Emily, a little girl I'd never met but already cared for, but for Nathan, who was breaking under the weight of his past mistakes. "What are you going to do?" I asked, my voice soft but firm. Nathan's jaw clenched, and he looked away for a moment, his hands balling into fists at his sides. When he spoke, his voice was raw, each word heavy with resolve. "I've canceled a major deal with a client, one that would have secured my company's future for the next decade," he said. "It was the only way to get Richard to back off. He wanted that deal, and I gave it up to protect Emily. And you." I stared at him, my breath catching in my throat. Nathan Caldwell, the man who'd built an empire on ruthless determination, had just sacrificed a piece of that empire for his daughter, and for me. The weight of his words settled over me, and I felt a tear slip down my cheek, my emotions a tangled mess of gratitude and awe. "Nathan," I whispered, my voice trembling. "You didn't have to do that." He stepped closer, his hand reaching out to cup my cheek, his touch gentle but firm. "Yes, I did," he said, his voice breaking with emotion. "I've spent my life building walls, Charlotte, keeping everyone at a distance to protect myself. But you've shown me what it means to fight for something real. I need you to stay, to help me through this. Please." His words hit me like a wave, and I felt my resolve solidify, a fierce determination taking root inside me. I covered his hand with mine, holding his gaze, and nodded. "I'm not going anywhere," I said, my voice steady now. "We'll face this together." Nathan's eyes softened, and he pulled me into his arms, his embrace warm and solid, a stark contrast to the cold distance that had once defined us. I clung to him, my cheek pressed against his chest, and for the first time, I felt like we were truly a team, two broken souls united by a shared purpose. Later that day, Eleanor arrived at the shop, her presence a welcome comfort. She brought Emily with her. Nathan had arranged for her to be brought to the city, to keep her close while we dealt with Richard. The little girl was a miniature version of Nathan, with the same gray eyes and dark hair, but her smile was all her own, bright and unguarded. I watched as Eleanor helped her change into a fresh set of clothes, the two of them laughing as they struggled with a stubborn button, and I felt a warmth spread through me, a sense of family I hadn't known I could have. "We need a plan," Eleanor said, her voice low as she sat beside me. Emily and Jack now playing with a small bouquet of flowers in the corner. Richard won't stop until he's destroyed Nathan. And you. I nodded, my mind racing. We'll use the truth against him, I said, my voice firm. Nathan's already taken the first step by being honest about Emily. Now we need to expose Richard for what he is, a manipulator who's been using Nathan's past to control him. Eleanor's eyes lit up with determination, and she squeezed my hand. I'm with you, she said, her voice steady. Let's do this. For Emily, for Nathan, for all of us. As the sun set, casting a warm glow over the shop, I looked at Nathan, who was watching Emily with a tenderness that made my heart ache. I thought of my mother, of the sacrifices she'd made for me, and I knew I'd do the same for this little girl, for the man who was slowly becoming more than just a husband in name. We were a family now, bound not by duty, but by choice, and I'd fight with everything I had to protect that. The late afternoon sun bathed my flower shop in a warm, golden glow, its rays filtering through the windows and casting soft shadows on the wooden floor. I stood behind the counter, my hands gently guiding Emily's as we arranged a bouquet of daisies together. Her small fingers fumbled with the stems, but her gray eyes, so much like Nathan's, sparkled with delight as she placed a flower in the vase. "Look, Charlotte," she exclaimed, her voice bright with pride. "It's pretty, right?" I smiled, my heart swelling with a warmth I hadn't known I could feel. "It's perfect, Emily," I said, brushing a strand of dark hair from her face. I, Charlotte Evans, had become Charlotte Caldwell in name months ago, but it was only now, in this quiet moment, that I truly felt like part of a family. Emily, Nathan's 5-year-old daughter, had become a permanent part of our lives after the press conference, her presence a constant reminder of the stakes we'd fought for, and won. The past week had been a whirlwind of action and emotion. Nathan and I, with Eleanor's help, had turned the tables on Richard Hayes, exposing his manipulative tactics to the media. We'd uncovered evidence of his own shady business dealings, embezzlement, blackmail, deals that had hurt countless people, and presented it at a press conference that left the city buzzing. Richard's reputation was in tatters, his threats against Emily and her mother rendered powerless, and Nathan's honesty about his daughter had won him a surprising amount of public support. The headlines had shifted from scandal to redemption. Billionaire CEO protects family, takes down rival in bold move. But the victory wasn't just in the public eye. It was in the quiet moments, the ones that mattered most. I thought of my mother, who I'd visited again just days ago, our conversations slowly mending the years we'd lost. I thought of Eleanor and Jack, who'd become my anchors through this storm, their laughter filling the shop whenever they visited. And I thought of Nathan, the man who'd started as a stranger but had become so much more. The bell above the door jingled, and I looked up to see Nathan step inside, his tall frame filling the doorway. He was dressed in a simple white shirt and jeans, a far cry from the tailored suits I'd first seen him in, and his dark hair caught the sunlight as he smiled. A real, genuine smile that made my heart skip a beat. Emily squealed, abandoning the bouquet to run to him, and he scooped her up in his arms, her laughter echoing through the shop. "Daddy," she cried, wrapping her arms around his neck. "Look what I made with Charlotte." Nathan's eyes softened. As he looked at the bouquet, then at me, his gaze warm with something I'd come to recognize as love. "It's beautiful, sweetheart," he said, kissing her forehead before setting her down. "Why don't you go pick out some more flowers? For the vase?" Emily nodded eagerly and scampered off, leaving Nathan and me alone at the counter. He stepped closer, his hand reaching out to take mine, his touch gentle but firm. "You've been amazing with her," he said, his voice low and sincere. "I don't know how to thank you, Charlotte." I squeezed his hand, my heart full. You don't have to thank me, I said, my voice soft but steady. She's a part of you, Nathan, and that makes her a part of me. His eyes searched mine, and I saw a flicker of something. Hope, maybe, or a promise of something more. He reached into his pocket, pulling out a small velvet box, and my breath caught in my throat. I know our marriage didn't start the way either of us wanted, he said, his voice trembling with emotion. But you've shown me what it means to fight for something real, to build a family worth protecting. You've taught me that true honor isn't in wealth or power. It's in the people we love. He opened the box, revealing a simple silver ring, its band engraved with tiny daisies, a perfect match for the necklace he'd given me on our wedding night. Charlotte, he said, his voice breaking, will you marry me again? This time. For love? Tears welled in my eyes, and I felt a sob rise in my throat. But it was a sob of joy, of relief, of a happiness I'd never thought I'd find. I nodded, unable to speak, and Nathan slipped the ring onto my finger, his hands trembling as he pulled me into his arms. His lips found mine, and the kiss was soft, tender, a promise of a future we'd build together. I melted into him, my arms wrapping around his neck, and for the first time, I felt truly home. We pulled apart as Emily ran back, her arms full of flowers, her laughter filling the shop. Daddy, Charlotte, look, she said, holding up a daisy. Can we put this one in too? Of course, sweetheart, I said, wiping my tears as I knelt beside her. Nathan joined us, his hand resting on my shoulder, and we worked together, arranging the bouquet as a family. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm glow over us, and I thought of my mother, of the daisies we'd planted together, of the life I'd thought I'd lost. I'd found it again, here, in this shop, with Nathan and Emily by my side. As we finished the bouquet, I looked at Nathan, his gray eyes shining with love, and I knew our journey wasn't over. There would be challenges ahead, new battles to fight, but we'd face them together, as a family. I touched the daisy pendant, at my throat, a symbol of the past I'd reclaimed, and I smiled, a quiet promise to myself. We'd built something beautiful from the ashes of our pain, a late-blooming happiness that was worth every struggle. The city lights sparkled outside, a reminder of the world we'd fought to overcome. But here, in this small shop, we'd found our own light, a light that would guide us forward, together. If you've enjoyed this journey of love, redemption, and family, I'd truly appreciate it if you could give this video a thumbs up. It means the world to me. And if you want to see more stories that tug at your heartstrings and inspire your soul, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you never miss an update. Let's keep exploring the beauty of human connection together. See you in the next chapter.